Hello world of YouTube and welcome to the listening log update for July of 2022. There's 10 albums I listened to over the last month, some requests, some suggestions, some catch-up, some new stuff. It's a nice variety of things. So let's go ahead and dive on in.
Maybe all things have been misconceptions. That's the life you chose.
Now, even though I would consider myself a moderate Coheed and Cambria fan, I think that they have some real highs, and I don't think they put out an outright awful album. I wouldn't say I'm as intense of a fan as at least I used to be, even though I have covered their last album, the first part of this trilogy, Vaxis 1, The Unheavenly Creatures. I haven't spun that record nearly as much as I thought I would post-release. I enjoyed that record a decent amount, but to say that that album is the least sticky album in the band's catalog would be an understatement. It's got some jams still, and I still appreciate the dark theatrics that coated that project, but I will say its follow-up, Vaxis 2, A Window of the Waking Mind, I feel, is a stronger album, a more compelling listen, and a tighter listening experience on top of that. I think that the focus on punchier production helps a lot of the stronger hooks on this album stand taller than anything on that last album, and I feel like this album does what I feel like great Coheed records do, at least more consistently, in that it bridges that songwriting, bridges the deep lore-filled storytelling with some real emotional resonance that it can instill in the listener in a more broad sense. You know, I feel like tracks like Beautiful Losers and The Liars Club are great examples of that. Liars Club, I think, might be the strongest song the band has released in fucking years. I think the hook of that song is colossal, and when everything punches in, it just cuts like a knife. I also think that the dense riffing on another single on here, Shoulders, has some really good oomph to it. I think that Love Murder 1 is a really well-written song that feels like it's really going into some nice details, but also still has a compelling hook to draw the listener in. While I think this album still has some moments that kind of set it back in some regards, like I think Our Love, while a nice soft moment and a good reprieve for the listener, it's not the best soft moment the band has ever written, but I do think it does come off of the heels of another one of the album's more mid-cuts, Bad Man. You know, this album can shine with some catchy moments, and even some of its prog offshoots I feel like get the job done pretty well, like Rise Nyanasha and Ladders of Supremacy. Some good theatrical-sized, meteor cuts that I think get the job done. I just think this album plays with this sort of idea of sonic concepts in tandem with telling this story in a way that mirrors with what bands like Protoman were doing on Act 2, but not quite sticking the landing quite like they did. This is still a really fun record, and I think it again has some of the band's strongest moments, but its pitfalls veer it in directions that I don't necessarily hate, but don't love to see this band pull together in this fashion. It's still getting a 7. I think it's a very solid record by and large, and I feel like it does a good job at showcasing Claudio's talents as a songwriter, with the band just firing off on some really good cylinders. It just has some lulls that, to me, set it back more so than I initially had with The Unheavenly Creatures. I will say my opinion on that previous album has changed rather drastically post its release. It's still a solid record, but I do think that this is a step above it in a handful of instances. I've gotten Boy Jr. a few times on my For You page on TikTok, and I've enjoyed what snippets of their music that I've heard on their profile, but I figured I'd actually do a full excursion into one of her albums, and their newest one, Pay Attention to Me, is honestly a pretty solid DIY style record that showcases a lot of what she's shown in snippets on her profile, more fleshed out into a full, worthwhile experience. You know, I like the melding of reverb-soaked atmospheres and some reverb guitar work with some more punchier, abrasive synthetics. I think her voice melds across the two very, very well. I love the buzzing, slow build of the opener Chartreuse. I think that once Smart Man settles into its groove and everything comes into the fray, it comes together very nicely. I also enjoy Meet Me in the Middle. It's one of the songs that I had heard on my For You page that I was excited to hear it in full. And I think the songwriting on tracks like that, Do You Really Like Me or Do You Just Need a Therapist, and Pay Attention to Me, the title track, actually do a good job at showing some reflection and some breaking down of somebody else in her life. I also think that comes in really well on the closer, a hit song from 2016, which I was expecting to be a bit more of a joke than it actually is. Sure, some of the production seems like it's sort of poking fun at that, but the songwriting really doesn't in a really sincere way that I think that she balances very, very well. I also enjoy a lot of the writing on a track like Narcissist Baby, even if I don't necessarily like the song itself. It's a style of song that I see artists do from time to time, whether it's like the rockish cheer style or that kind of thudding groove. I just rarely think it sticks for me. I like parts of the song, it's just not one of my favorite songs on the album. Same with Hey Sorry. I think that her singing on Hey Sorry is fantastic. I just don't like the song as much as others on the record. I think this record is honestly, though, very, very solid. I think that it's a great batch of some catchy songs, some good grooves, some great sonic ideas on here, and I think that if you like some noisier, tinged, reverb-soaked music, I would give this a shot. I think it's really, really solid. I'm giving it like a 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed this thing, and I'd honestly like to see her continue to just branch out, experiment more, get noisier, get more reverb in there, you know? I like what she's cooking with, and I like what this project has going on by and large. I think it's quality. I'm always surprised whenever math rock duo Giraffes drops an album because they're a band that I enjoy, but I never follow all of that closely. However, I do think that they have some albums that I would put up there as some of my personal favorites within the math rock genre. However, on this new album, Death Breath, they do a shift in sound or a shift in style that I don't think completely matches what I would argue as quality or a good idea for this band. Death Breath gets off on a great foot, don't get me wrong. I feel like the run from Pulse Lick through Bug Money are 3 relatively tight jams that have some intricacies spicing in the mix with some allusions to a sonic shift, but once Wax Teeth settles in to its plodding monotony, the album really feels like it's wrapped up in itself. You know, because not only does it have that track, it also has OK Song, another really slow, shoegazy style crawl that is one of the more dull things this band has ever pulled together. I even think it taints the almost 8-minute closer Sling, which is trying to do some fun musical stuff, but just feels all the less compelling given what it's followed. Sure, Electric Meat is an okay song. It's an alright jam that adds a little more intricacy into the mix, but I feel like it comes a little too late, especially given it's wedged between 2 of the more boring tracks that this album is going together. I don't know. I was pretty disappointed with this record by and large, especially given, again, the caliber of consistency I felt like this group was firing on, even if they weren't the most prolific band out there. This thing was mad disappointing. I give it like a 5. It's got some highs, but man, is it dull as shit.
Both ran to the center of the ring while the rhinestone soup continued.
Given the time between Schlagenheim and Cavalcade, I figured Black Midi was going to sit on that record for at least a full year, but right around the corner from their last release, we have a new one, Hellfire. It's a tight little 30-plus minute record that has all of the madness I would expect from this band, but it's cranked up just a little bit more. There's a bit more in the vein of spoken word madness, while the band continues to shift its own identity across several tracks. You got this sort of stage setter Hellfire that has this sinister edge underneath it, before this almost show-tunesy, show-stoppy Sugar Zoo rolls in and settles you into the insanity, while Eat Man Eat just takes you and throws you through a whirlwind. You know, I like the groove on Welcome to Hell that sort of enhances the vibe seen on the opener Hellfire. I think the sleek, almost beachy vibes of Still evoke the vibe seen on a record like California from Mr. Bungle. I feel like overall a lot of the sonic components and overall, again, just style the band is taking on this record feels very similar to California by and large, but I think the band adds their own twist that they've been expanding upon over the last couple of records on Hellfire to make it feel like a snug piece of their discography. You know, I enjoy the sprawling cacophony that crops up in pockets of The Race is About to Begin, but I also enjoy that this record does take the time to sort of shift around and dance in other realms. You know, Dangerous Liaisons is another track with a sort of sleek groove that the band rides incredibly well. The Defiance acts as like a 3-minute crescendo to cast the record off into its last song. And 27 Questions is a pretty interesting closer as well. I don't know. This record keeps a lot of the intrigue that the band has been building throughout their discography thus far, and shows them continuing to sort of adapt and change their sound ever so slightly while adorning different ideas, while remaining in a pocket of tight musicianship that they have been showcasing a consistency of across the releases. I think this is another great notch in their belt. I think it's a really brief listen, but it's got a lot packed in to those 30-plus minutes. I give it like a 9 out of 10. This is another quality release from these guys. I'm glad that they're staying so consistent while remaining incredibly prolific. I think that that's a hard balance to strike, and I think that they're striking it very, very well.
It's autonomous computers sending shooters back in time at the behest of defunct message boards.
While I've been throwing a lot of praise to and I've become a bona fide Arm & Hammer fan, I've talked about how I haven't really delved really deeply into Ulysses or Billy Woods' respective solo discographies. I figured I would buck that by looking at Billy's latest album, Aethiopes, a record that is dense with a lot it has to say lyrically while remaining relatively sparse and loose from an instrumental perspective, and made all the more better by Billy's incredible delivery. I enjoy this project a hell of a lot. It sees Billy crafting these picturesque story-style presentations of themes and ideas revolving around life and poverty, like on the run from asylum through wharves, getting gritty as fuck with details like on Savage or Heavy Water, which sees him trading bars with LP masterfully. You've got a great deconstruction and comparison of the Palace of Versailles versus the failure of the American Dream, like on Versailles, which is a great feature from Deathspot. You've got kind of a mini posse cut on 9X with Arm & Hammer coming together with dudes from Crown Nation, talking about racial struggles and religion on 9X. I enjoy a lot of this record by and large. I think that it is a smash. And I think the album's pacing is masterfully handled. While the album feels very brief in runtime, there's a lot that Billy packs in here and trades off with his variety of guests that I feel like all embody this murky darkness that I think that loose production helps enhance the mood of tenfold. Like on the lo-fi, high-end twinkling on wharves, or the creepy, plucked sounds in the background of No Hard Feelings. I think the sounds of Heavy Water are as dense as I would expect a track featuring LP to feature. The drum production on that track is nuts. And honestly, I feel like while Billy has a lot he has to say, talks about stuff like generational divide, like on Remorseless, or equating the stillness and the oceanic waves of the doldrums to the tension when doing a drug deal. There's a lot of great, eloquent word spinning on here that I was expecting, given what I have heard of his stuff before and the stuff that I've heard through Arm & Hammer, but damn, this record is like an all-out show-stopping showcase of Billy Woods' talent as a writer and as a rapper. And I like a lot of the collaborations here. This is easily an album of the year contender, easily a rap album of the year contender, which is shocking given how dense this year has been with hip-hop. But I like this thing a lot. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I think this is a smash release from Billy, and I feel like if you like abstract style hip-hop with a lot of dense lyrical ideas, I would listen to this new Billy Woods album. I'm sure you've already heard it, but I'm just now catching on to it, and I'm really enjoying it. You know, when I heard the first single from this new Jack White album, Entering Heaven Alive, Love is Selfish, I was expecting just more of a reprieve from the zaniness that was Fear of the Dawn, a record that I still hold as a fantastic release from this year. I think that Jack concentrated his quirky ideas into a fun, energetic, wild rock experience. And while Entering Alive definitely does have a lot more of a subdued sonic palette, there's a lot more acoustic guitars, like what we're seeing on Love is Selfish. You know, a tip from You to Me, the opener, solidifies that full stop. I like that along the journey that this record takes, not only does it continue to retain this consistent acoustic sonic palette that I think Jack harnesses very, very well, like on A Tree from Fire Within, or across If I Die Tomorrow. I like that he still injects some sort of off-kilter zaniness in the mix. You know, I like the almost Doors-ish groove on I've Got You Surrounded with My Love. I enjoy the throwback sounds on Queen of the Bees. I think that's another quirky track that Jack pulls together very well. I also like how the production across this project continues to have some interesting ideas, like the breakdown on If I Die Tomorrow. The drums on that record almost sound like trip-hop drums with how they're produced, and I think that Jack creates a really good pocket on that track that I think is fantastic. I think that Sonic Palette comes in beautifully when the drums kick in on A Madman from Manhattan as well. I also like that this record feels a little more focused lyrically. While Fear of the Dawn was really, really cool and had a lot going on sonically, lyrically, it was also kind of a hodgepodge. Whereas this definitely feels like it's trying to channel something a bit more sincere. You know, love is a central theme of a decent amount of the record. Seems to be sort of reflections as well in pockets of the album lyrically that I think Jack sort of keeps as a good follow-through. I don't know, this album in general, I like as much as Fear of the Dawn, but I feel like it definitely presents a completely different side of Jack's sound and his songwriting. You know, the strings on Help Me Along are so lush, and I love the overall, not grandness, but just fullness that the mix has on that song that doesn't sound like anything that could have ended up on Fear of the Dawn. Usually when artists drop like 2 albums in the same year, it feels like they're following in the same congruent patterns of each other, but these feel like 2 completely different entities, and I really enjoy what Jack is doing on here, and I feel like it enhances and expands his ideas as an artist thus far, but in a completely different way that he's done on his last 2 records. I think this is a great project, and as a longtime fan of Jack White, I like seeing Jack tap into this sonic palette and this overall songwriting style and making it work. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. And this is another quality release. There's some tracks that I don't think fit the cohesion of the album lyrically as others, but I think overall, consistency-wise across this project from a song perspective, this still hits the mark on the head, full stop.
Flow got you fast souls and fascination. I made her make it clap, then I told her congratulations.
Whenever an artist decides to drop a sequel album to a beloved project, it's always kind of a gamble. Some work, some don't. But when you make that sequel your first album in 5 years, that's an even steeper uphill battle to fight. Yet Joey Badass amicably sticks the landing on his newest album, 2000, which is a sequel record to one of his beloved breakout mixtapes, 1999, and his first album since 2017's All-American Badass. I think Joey is still easily the best component of this project. He still has a lot of talent as a rapper. His writing is still top-notch. He has a good way to tap into a variety of ideas while writing in a similar pocket across this project's runtime. You know, he's got his stage-setting opener with the Badass. He's got his Bitch on Back single on top of that with Where I Belong. He's got some heat on Brand New 9/11. He's got some vibes on Cruise Control. He's got his own reflective / poignant topics he wants to talk about, like on Eulogy, where he reflects about his generation, or Survivor's Guilt, where he pays tribute to Captain Steez. He's even got his own New York's Finest heat with Zip Codes. However, I feel like the biggest crux of this album, and the biggest kneecap, amidst its very smooth production that evokes similar vibes to what Lupe was doing on Drill Music in Zion, or Denzo was doing on Melt My Eyes, is that he doesn't have enough to spice up that track listing amidst all of its smoothness. I like the production on here well enough. I think that it is very, very solid, if not a bit too carbon copy in pockets. I also don't like a lot of the features, by and large, on this project. I like West Side Gun, and I like JID on their respective songs. I think that they tap into the track's themes as a whole very, very well. But how are you only going to give Nas an outro and give Chris Brown a place in your spotlight? I don't know. The production in here in general, I feel like lends itself to having more dudes either that are popping in New York now or vets in the game just cropping up in here and laying down some heat. The project feels too sparse or inconsequential without Joey spicing it up in pockets. You know, it's not bad, it's not awful, but it's definitely a lot more average and solid than I was hoping it would be, given I do like 1999, and I think Joey is a fantastic rapper. Is this album awful? No. But it is a little bit disappointing and not quite the full-out smash I was expecting it to be. I feel like if you like Joey, you'll enjoy the bars that he has on here. You'll like what he has to say. He finds a pocket and rocks it. But you might also be leaving wishing there was a little bit more to this project that seemingly has a lot of talent in some of what it's got going on, but not enough of it to justify how much of it there is. I think it's solid, though. I'm giving it a 6. I wish there were more. I certainly wish there were less of some other things. And I definitely kind of wish Joey bounced back with a little more consistency across the board. So my buddy Adam asked me to check out this new Deer Hunter album, Antimai, and it's a band that I've never really gotten into or really given the time of day, partially because, similarly to a band like Coheed and Cambria, they just have this dense discography that is built around telling this grand story that the band is wanting to pull together. However, this new album, Antimai, isn't that. It's a brand new concept. It's a lot of world building and storytelling or POV, slice-of-life style writing to service a new concept, a new world that the band is wanting to create called Antimai that is sort of a world that you see a lot talked about in especially modern media. You know, games like Stray or films like Parasite really do a good job at expressing this as well, this sort of classist divide that continues to grow the longer that capitalism exists to be a thing. You know, you've got the rich living in the tower, the middle of it all, where the farther you get from that tower, the more poverty you start to see. You know, you go from the tower to the rich folks, to the police, to the middle class and lower middle class before going into the poverty which coats the outskirts, really outside of the walls of the city, but close enough to be considered a part of the culture that is Antimai. And I think that this record does a good job at showcasing this band's ability to write some really tight-knit songs with some lyrics that do lend themselves to quality world building and slice-of-life telling. You know, you get to see the struggles that the impoverished people face on the beginning of the record, Poverty. You know, I feel like Lowtown does a good job at showcasing a little more stability, but still a fiending for more. Whereas Middle Class sits in this, you know, complacent middle ground because they don't want to end up like those in Lowtown or in the impoverished circle, while retaining dreams that someday they'll reach the highs of those in living in the laps of luxury that ironically see them as lesser beings and want to spit on their face. You know, I enjoy the overall sonic palette that this album coats while trying to tell that sort of story. There's a sort of brightness to a lot of it that I feel like undercuts a lot of the darkness, or at least enhances it in a different sort of way, while also showcasing the band's propensity to be tight musicians. You know, this isn't quite what I was expecting, but I also didn't know what to expect with this band on a large-scale project. I do like a lot of the funk and grooves that are injected on here. You know, I think Middle Class evolves into this funky groove. I enjoy the throttling kineticism of Patrol. I like the sounds within Nature and Tower as well. I feel like Tower's very relaxing. Soundscape does kind of lend itself to the mindset of those living in the upper class. While luxury sleek rock styling suit the sort of attitude that the rich would have potentially towards those beneath them. I kind of wish Lowtown had a little more going on. I like the evolving arpeggios that go throughout the soundscape, but I do wish that there was a groove that the band evolved into a little more organically. I don't know, I feel like that song is a great example of some of the cruxes I see with the album. While I like bold, ambitious prog projects, I feel like tracks like Lowtown embody sort of a lack of cohesion across a track. IMO, that doesn't necessarily crop up a lot on this particular album, but I feel like is sort of a showcasing of a crux that I do see in some prog act sometimes. I also like the idea of a song like Industry, but I don't think it's the best version of that type of song. I don't know, this album does have a lot of highs, and I like a lot of the showcasing on display here, but I feel like there are some instances that I feel like the album is a little undercut or doesn't quite utilize an idea quite to its fullest potential. But this is still a great album. I still really enjoyed this. I'm still giving this like an 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I enjoyed what it was trying to do. And I thank Adam for the request, for the suggestion to cover, or at least to listen to, this particular project, and it has me wanting to dive more into their discography to see how they told their own grand epic across a handful of records.
Cake on their wrist, Tiffany blue billboards over the ceiling. We don't like plain.
Now, while the lead single to this album, Break My Soul, dropping days after Drake's first single from his house album, adorning a much better presentation of the house style, seemed like a pure spit in the face of Drake, this album following that renaissance does have a bit more to offer than just some house-flavored variety. However, I will say, the dance tracks that are here, I think, are better composed and better tracks than the ones on Honestly Nevermind. I thought Break My Soul was a bop when it dropped. I think it's just one of the best songs that's dropped this summer. And I love the avenues that this album takes when further exploring that dance atmosphere. And I think the beauty of sticking the landing from an album perspective in this lane better than that album is that this album is basically pockets of dance parties with some great cuts in between those to kind of give the listener a little bit of a break while keeping them settled in their own respective grooves. You know, I think I'm That Girl kind of winds the listener up and throttles them through Cozy and Alien Superstar incredibly well. I also think Cuff It acts as a good funky intermission from that before throwing the listener into some high energy that then goes through a great gambit into Break My Soul and Church Girl. I think Plastic Off the Sofa coming off of that song with even more funky grooves at their core is fantastic and also bleeds into an incredible run from Virgo's Groove in through Thick. I think Grace Jones on Move is a great touch. I think Heated, while not my favorite dance-driven groove on this album, is still an energy carrier nonetheless and still does its job pretty adequately. I think Thick is a decent closeout to that stretch as well, even if it's, again, not necessarily my favorite song on the album. I like that similarly to tracks like America Has a Problem and All Up in Your Mind, it does still embody Beyonce as this goddess-level figure that I think she just handles like a walk through the park at this point. I do like the sampling on this album by and large. You know, I think Big Freedom makes sense to put on Break My Soul. I also think Donna Summer's a great idea for Pure Honey and enhances the raw energy that that song has at its core. I think that this album has some pockets it thrives in incredibly well, and I think by and large it is a better project than Honestly Nevermind, if that wasn't obvious. I don't think everything's great on here. I gave some light criticism on a couple of tracks already, but I think All Up in Your Mind is another weaker cut. It just sits in this lull that the album kind of goes to eventually. Sure, it picks itself up by the end, and I think that the last stretch of this record is great as well, but there's definitely a pocket where this record doesn't keep me hooked quite to the capacity that the album had throughout a majority of its runtime. I think that it retains a lot of the power that Beyonce is known to channel on her highs, while putting her in an avenue that also kind of makes sense in the same way that it should have for Drake, but Beyonce gets to use her power as a vocalist in a way that this scene had seen thriving throughout its prime. I think that this is a great adaptation of a genre that I do enjoy, and I feel like Beyonce reins it in all the right ways. I think that this album is pretty damn good. I'm giving it an 8. I'm giving it a firm 8. It's got some bops, it's got some good energy, and it's got some really good ideas at its core that I think Beyonce just handles gracefully.
I'll keep you posted, I promise I'm better with the sun.
You know, while their last album, Fake It Flowers, sort of challenged people's expectations of Beabadoobee, what I like about Beatopia is that it takes those challenges it threw at you and refines them, expands upon them, does what I was hoping they would do with the injection of more intimacy, and that's sort of retailor people's nostalgic focus for this, or imprint to put on this band. You know, while their Space Cadet EP and parts of Fake It Flowers more showed worship to artists like the Smashing Pumpkins with their dense guitar work and having name drops of Stephen Malkmus in the lyrics, this feels more of a tribute to a different side of the 90s. Stuff like what the Cardigans were doing during their twee era and all that sort, you know. While I enjoyed the intimacy on Fake It Flowers, and I thought the lyrics did a good job at sort of enhancing that atmosphere, I think that that's improved upon even more so with the soft moments on here. I mean, even just the opener of the album, Beatopia Cult Song, does a good job at welcoming some string sounds and some warmth into the soundscape. And while it goes into its own stride of sort of chill indie vibes with the next couple of songs, I like that once Ripples rolls around, those strings swell back in, and it introduces a handful of different switch-ups that the band's going to go through. You know, they have more of a Cardigan-style jams with the Perfect Pair and Broken CD, and I feel like the group balances that soundscape well. I like that once talk does come in and some noise creeps in the mix, it feels like a welcome change of pace. You know, the moments where they do add a bit more intensity or density to the soundscape, it actually feels like a refreshing dive into something adjacent to what I used to like about this band. You know, and I don't mind its lack of presence. I feel like this still gives the band room to explore. You know, the drum production on that feels akin to more of the electronic scene in the 90s, and I feel like that sort of gets a good comeback in Tinkerbell is Overrated, a collaboration with Pink Panthers, a collaboration that I also think comes together incredibly well. You know, and the same heartbreak and sadness that was seen on Fake It Flowers is all the more represented and, again, further enhances the intimacy on here. 1036 has this sort of dejected blankness to it, almost a numbness, but there's still some pain creeping on underneath there that I think cuts through very poignantly. I think the same is sort of said, I think the same sentiment is sort of shared in Broken CD as well. There's a lot of that on this project, and I think that, again, lyrically, it's still a good listen. I just think the band handles it sonically a bit more compellingly this time around. And I ultimately leaves me liking it a bit more. I'm giving this an 8. I think it's a really good record. I enjoyed a lot of what this has going on. I think similarly to a handful of records I've checked out this month, there's a density to the variety, but the pace is just excellent. And I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this a lot more than Fake It Flowers, and it's something that I'm excited to keep spinning as the year goes on. But those are my thoughts on the albums that I listened to. Did you like them? Did you like my thoughts? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this, give it a like. If you want to see more of my music gaming and general notary content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community through polls. It's linked in the description. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.